Ladies and gentlemen, we are lucky to have with us today an outstanding local historian and the preeminent expert on Cleveland's ethnic history. He holds a joint appointment with the Department of History in Case Western Reserve University, along with being historian and senior vice president in the Western Reserve Historical Society. He is the author and editor of several books about Cleveland, including the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, available in its entirety online, if I may add. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. John Grabowski.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. It's interesting, I learn something new every time I come out to the Kossuth Statue. I've actually taught a class here with all the traffic going past. I won't go into that, but I just realized by looking at the base of the statue that the base of the statue was constructed and created by the Joseph Carabelli Company. And Carabelli is literally the founder of Little Italy. So we have here a Magyar-Italian collaborative effort, if you will. But let me talk about the statue a bit and put it in the context of the city's history. For about 120 years, students at Case Western Reserve University and its predecessors, the Case School of Applied Sciences, and later that's the Case School of Institute of Technology and Western Reserve University, have been able to see Lajos Kossuth, at least his statue, from over there. Now, whether they really knew who he was is an open question. Likely those who had Magyar roots understood who Kossuth was and what the statue's importance was. And those who took world history classes at CWRU hopefully would have known who Kossuth was in the history of Europe and European liberalism. How Kossuth came to this campus, so to speak, and it's not on the campus, we're just off the campus, is an interesting story, and one that I'd like to reflect on larger matters in the history of our city. It all began, as you've heard, so to speak, in January 1852 when Lajos Kossuth came to Cleveland as part of his tour of the United States, a tour that was conceived as an effort to raise awareness of the Hungarian cause within the Habsburg Empire and also to raise funds for that cause. Kossuth's reception in the U.S. was exceptional. It was spectacular. In a sense, it was akin to a modern rock star coming through the city. Hats, scarves, and other items found market. Kossuth hats, Kossuth scarves, Kossuth memorabilia sold like hotcakes all across the United States. When he came to Cleveland, it was a major event. Mayor William Case, that's the family of Case Western Reserve University, and other dignitaries accompanied him. They got on the train. He was coming up from Pittsburgh area. They got on at a stop called Newburgh. We now call that Slavic Village, and they accompanied Kossuth into the city at that point. He drew thousands to his speeches in the city of Cleveland. This is at a time when the combined population of Cleveland and Ohio City, the west side was a separate city, was less than 30,000. And the population of Cuyahoga County around 50,000. So imagine that, thousands of people attending Kossuth's speeches and really enjoying them. And they paid $2 or $3 per ticket for the lecture. Now, this sounds cheap now, but if you do the mathematics, it's equivalent to about $96 a ticket today. The real thing, though, is there were not many Hungarians in Cleveland at that point, just a handful, just a trickle who had come into Cleveland. So this shows the interest of the general community in what Kossuth was doing and what he stood for. And this is an example of American, I think, liberalism, American looking at revolutions and changes that lead to better governments. They're looking at them favorably. And at the same time, Americans are also debating slavery. So this is a complex world at this time. If you're looking at Cleveland at this point in time, it started as a New England settlement in 1796, but at this time, Germans constituted the largest immigrant group in Cleveland. Irish were about second, and then you had other immigrants that we don't think of as immigrants very often. English, Scots, and Welsh. But by 1860, 44% of the population of Cleveland was of foreign birth, which means that if you were walking the streets in Cleveland in 1860, you could tap somebody on the shoulder and have a 1 in 2 chance almost of tapping somebody on the shoulder who hadn't been born in the United States. I'll fast forward now to 1902. At this time, Cleveland's Hungarian population had grown substantially and was well on its way to becoming the nucleus of one of the largest Hungarian settlements outside of what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Many of the Hungarians lived in Lower Buckeye, worked in the industries along the railroads there. Others were on the near west side. Some of them worked for Theodor Kunst in his factory that built cases for sewing machines and later automobile frames. So you had two Hungarian communities, one on the west side and one on the east side. That's when a decision, as we heard, was made to erect a statue to Kossuth to commemorate the 50th anniversary of his coming to Cleveland. Prior to the 50th anniversary of his visit, the Kossuth Statue Committee was formed, and it commissioned András Toth, forgive my Magyar, to reproduce the Kossuth Memorial he had designed in Hungary, and asked each county in Hungary for earth from the local landmarks to be placed at the base of the statue. That earth is still here under the statue. And that's why when André was talking about the importance of statues, the more you read them, the more you see what they mean, and the more you understand what is there. The Hungarians approached Mayor Tom Johnson with a request to place the statue on the city's public square right downtown. But that proposal proved problematic, as old enmities from Europe arose in Cleveland. Segments of the Slavic community came together and approached the mayor. Their argument supposedly was that if one ethnic group had a statue on public square, every group would want a statue on public square as well. Now, you can read something else into that in terms of some of the animosities that were going on. Johnson, being a smart politician, of course, knew the real issues behind this approach and canceled the public square location. That's why Kossuth is here. Instead, the suggestion was made that the statue be placed in Wade Park. Now, Wade Park is down there. It's an area of land given to the city by Jephthah Homer Wade, one of the founders of Western Union Telegraph, and it was a public park beginning in the 1880s. Indeed, there was already a statue of Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, the hero of the War of 1812, had been removed from Public Square in 1892 and re-erected in Wade Park in 1894. The interesting story here is that Perry's statue, it was hard to move it off of Public Square because it had been placed there in 1860. Nobody wanted it moved, but they were building the new Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and so it went off. In retrospect, it seems that the move of Kossuth to Wade Park had a substantial impact on where memorials were to be located. And I think this is the main gist of what I'd like to say today. 3 years after this statue was erected, the Polish community of Cleveland erected a statue of Tadeusz Kosciuszko in Wade Park. It still stands. It's next to the Cleveland Museum of Art. Now, the story of the Kosciuszko statue, you have to forgive me, I'm half Polish, half Slovenian, so I've got to talk about Kosciuszko, okay? The statue was equally debatable because there were two religious factions, Roman Catholic factions in the Polish community. And one of the community factions was arguing that the face on Kosciuszko was modeled after the face of an unpopular renegade priest in Cleveland. The statue is still there. They got away with it. It still stands. 2 years after Kosciuszko, in 1907, the German community of Cleveland erected a statue of Goethe and Schiller. It's a copy of the original statue in Weimar, and it's one of 4 duplicate statues that are in German communities all over the United States. And there are reasons they erected it at that time, because German culture was at the center of a lot of American science and literature and music. But also, the German community was beginning to worry because so many Germans were assimilating rapidly into the American mainstream. So this was a reminder. And it was a good reminder because there were 30,000 people who came out to see the dedication of Goethe and Schiller. We're not done yet. 1 year after that, in 1908, a statue of Senator Marcus A. Hanna, right over there. Marcus Hanna was a political kingmaker, a wealthy man from Cleveland. He was sort of, if you'll forgive me, the Karl Rove of the late 19th century. He basically got William McKinley elected as president. He died as a senator unexpectedly. People thought that he was going to be a presidential candidate. His statue was erected in 1908, right over there, and it's by Augustin Gaudin, one of the most famous sculptors in American history. Very interesting statue. I could be here all afternoon to talk about what it says on the base of the statue. You can see it from here, and what you're looking at, if you see these little steel lights here, that's the circle that was University Circle. the university in the 1880s, the circle which surrounded a place where streetcars turned around, so there was a circular road around here. So Kossuth on one side, an American millionaire and powerful man on the other side. Think about that juxtaposition. There are other monuments that still went in Wade Park and the circle, including one of Milan Stefanik, which was dedicated in 1921 on Jephthah Drive, right below the Cleveland Museum of Art. I suspect all of this statue story is interesting, but I'm driven to speculate that it may have been a predecessor of sorts to another major landmark in Cleveland, the Cleveland Cultural Gardens. The gardens came in, and they are located along Rockefeller Park, along Dome Brook. And if you want to know where Dome Brook is here, if you see that stone sculpture in the middle of the street over there, that's where it cuts under here. Dome Brook is the home of the Cultural Gardens. The gardens came into full formation in the mid-1920s, but were anchored, so to speak, by the Shakespeare Garden, which was dedicated, it's now the British Garden, in 1916. Leo Weidenthal, a Jewish journalist, an expert on theater, and he was born on the same day but not the same year as Shakespeare, really had a focus on Shakespeare. So he pushed that. But after Shakespeare came up, he, along with the German Charles Wolfram and another Jewish person, Jenny Zwick, came together in 1926 to form basically the Cultural Garden League. That's interesting. I would argue that this creative moment in 1926, and this is interesting for immigration, was a reaction to the new quota law that was passed in 1924 to limit immigration to the United States. It was particularly focused on people from Southern, Central, and Eastern Europe. So the question we have open as historians is, had that Quota Act not been passed, how many more people would have come from Hungary? How many more people would have come from Italy? How many more people would have come from other countries to the south, central, and east of Europe? So it changed the demographic situation in Cleveland over time. Interestingly, to move to a conclusion here, the statues of Kossuth and Kosciuszko have remained where they were erected, while those of Goethe and Schiller have moved to the German Cultural Garden, and that of Stefanik has moved to the Slovak Cultural Garden. So these are two remnants of what people may have envisioned this circle to be. But I think location doesn't really matter. What does matter is the story of the many peoples from many lands that came to build Greater Cleveland. Relationships between them or within them may have been rocky or strained at times, but together, those who have come here from all around the world, including Hungary, have built a city and the region that we know today. Thank you.